Find out how this teething syrup became known as a baby killer on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. Charlotte Winslow was born in 1789 and was a pediatric nurse for about 30 years, and she created Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup as a cure-all for fussy babies. She formulated it in 1835, and in 1844, she shared her recipe with her son-in-law, Jeremiah Curtis of Bangor, Maine. He and his business partner, Benjamin Perkins, who were both druggists, started manufacturing Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup in 1849. The following year, in 1850, Mrs. Winslow died, so she wasn't really part of the process shortly after it began. The concoction was used for babies who were crying, teething, or had dysentery, and the opioids in the syrup caused a constipation effect, which helped treat the diarrhea. The syrup contained 65 milligrams of morphine per ounce, and it also contained alcohol as well. 1 teaspoonful had the morphine content equivalent to 20 drops of laudanum, which could cause coma, addiction, or death in an infant. I had never heard of laudanum before, so I had to look it up, and it's an opium mixture that contains morphine and codeine. In the 1873 edition of the Health Reformer, it suggested that babies 6 months of age receive no more than 2 to 3 drops of laudanum, but the dosages listed on the bottles of Miss Winslow's soothing syrup were pretty alarming. For a child under 1 month old, the recommendation was 6 to 10 drops. Children 3 months old were to be given a half a teaspoon, and children 6 months old and up were to be given a teaspoon 3 or 4 times a day. The recommended dosage for children with dysentery was to be repeated every 2 hours until visual improvement was noticed. 1 teaspoonful of the syrup would have contained enough morphine to kill the average child. So, as it turns out, many babies were given Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, they went to sleep, and never woke up, which is why it became known as the baby killer. There's no statistic on the number of children that died from the use of the soothing syrup because babies just died a lot back then, so moms didn't always link the two. But it's estimated that thousands of children died from morphine overdoses or from morphine addiction and withdrawal. I don't know much about morphine except that dying patients are given it when they're near the end, so I had to look that up too. How morphine works. Morphine is a type of opioid. Opioids are strong drugs that mimic our body's natural pain-killing substance called endorphins. The drugs were originally made from opium poppies, but now they're man-made in a laboratory. Opioids block pain messages to the brain. Excessive doses of morphine or combining it with other drugs can have fatal consequences. Alcohol increases the effect of morphine, such as sedation, drowsiness, or decreased motor skills. Morphine overdose can result in any of the following symptoms. So, getting back to the soothing syrup, it was widely marketed in North America and the United Kingdom. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup was really popular. In 1868, Curtis reported selling more than 1.5 million bottles annually. You can see why it was so popular. Their advertising was very attractive and often showed images of a mother and child. Throughout the 1800s, ingredients did not have to be listed on labels, and consumers were often unaware of the contents of the remedies that they purchased. Over time, in the U.S., Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup was forced to remove morphine from their formula and remove the word soothing from their brand name. Despite these major changes to the recipe and the name, as well as the product being hailed a baby killer by the American Medical Association in 1911, the syrup was still sold in most places until the 1930s, except for the Lafayette Drug Company from New Jersey, who was still manufacturing and selling Mrs. Winslow syrup until 1945. The British Pharmacy Book of Quackery in 1914 said that the Winslow soothing syrup was required to start printing a poison warning on the label, which saved the lives of many infants. Here's a column in the New York Times, December 1st, 1860, so about 10 years after the soothing syrup has been sold, but before anyone thought it was killing babies. So there's a whole column of testimonials for the soothing syrup, including this one that says, "Dear Sir, I am happy to be able to certify to the efficiency of Miss Winslow's soothing syrup and to the truth of what it is represented to accomplish. Having a little boy suffering greatly from teething who could not rest, and at night by his cries would not permit any of the family to do so, I purchased a bottle of the soothing syrup in order to test the remedy, and when given to the boy according to the directions, its effect upon him was like magic. He soon went to sleep, and all pain and nervousness disappeared. We have had no trouble with him since, and the little fellow will pass through with comfort the excruciating process of teething by the sole aid of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. Every mother who regards the health and life of her child should possess it." So you could see why a mother would naturally go out and buy a bottle. There were no ingredients to tell her the dangers. There are beautiful advertisements everywhere with mothers and babies, and there were gobs of testimonials in the newspapers. So, honestly, after giving your baby this and the baby died, the syrup really wouldn't be your first thought as the cause. That's why it went on for so long. So, about 30 years after the syrup had been sold, but still before people had caught on of its dangers, in 1879, the English composer Edward Elgar wrote an early musical work, part of his harmony music, for a wind quintet, which he titled Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup. I'll play a little clip of the song at the end. And that does it for this episode. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.